All right, welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. My name is Jake Ray, and I'm the Youth and Education Manager here at the most inspiring place on earth, the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. We are so excited to have another installment of our great Before the Snap series today, featuring our special guest, Susanna Nichols of the Tennessee Titans, and we'll get to her in a second. But if this is your first time watching this program today, we first want to thank you for joining in. You guys are going to learn a lot about different careers in and around the NFL, with the goal to show you that there's so many cool and unique careers that you can have. And today we're focusing on community relations in the National Football League. So if this is your first time joining in, thank you so much. If you're a return listener or return watcher, thank you so much as well. You guys are in for another excellent program here for this Before the Snap series. Here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we have a great mission statement. Our mission is to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence, all of which not only make our Hall of Famers great football players, but they make our Hall of Famers great people off the field. And truly, they make great employees for any organization. And we're going to talk a lot about those values today and how they made Ms. Nichols the best she could be, the best community relations coordinator that she could be within the Titans organization. And like I said, we'll get to her in a second. But first, I want to pass out some thank yous. First off, Susanna, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. We'll say this multiple times throughout the program, but thank you so much for everything that you do for the game of football and indirectly for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But more importantly, taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us and talk a little bit about your career. Secondly, I'd like to thank our teachers and administrators, our educators, professors, anybody who allowed us to come into their classroom today and talk to their students about different careers in and around the NFL. We know this school year has been crazy. It's been totally different than school years in the past, and we're excited to just be a small part of the learning process and your classes this year. And then lastly, I'd like to thank our students. If you're here with us before, you know that you guys are the ones who drive the program watching today. So if you're watching us on Facebook Live, please submit your questions. Let us know what school you go to, where you're from, what your name is, and ask that question, and we'll do our best. We got Nathan sitting out there monitoring all of those questions again today, and we'll do our best to get those questions into the program. But we can only ask them if you guys submit them. So make sure you get those questions in, and we'll be reminding you throughout the program about those as well. So today I am lucky to introduce, and we are very lucky to be joined by Susanna Nichols. Susanna is entering her 9th NFL season and her 6th with the Titans. Prior to her role with the Titans, she spent 2 seasons as a corporate communications manager with the Washington Redskins and now the Washington football team. She is responsible for all alumni programming, as well as the Redskins, as well as the planning and execution of community relations and initiatives. In her role with the Redskins, she worked closely with the team's community relations department, which she works full-time in now, to promote its events and generate positive media coverage outside the traditional scope of football, which is real interesting to dive in and learn about all the great community things going on in sports. Prior to the NFL, she spent a semester as an intern with Octagon, a global sports, entertainment, and lifestyle marketing and talent representation agency, which is a lot to take in there, but it sounds like a really great opportunity in the field of sports. She also served as community relations intern for the DC United of Major League Soccer. In 2012, she received an undergraduate degree in sport management with a minor in business administration from the University of Tennessee. While at Tennessee, she worked for the football team's recruiting department, as well as 2 years the famed women's basketball program, Hall of Fame coach Pat Summitt as well. She graduated from Georgetown University in 2013 with a master's degree in sport industry management. So I am very glad to welcome our special guest today, Susanna Nichols of the Tennessee Titans. Susanna, thank you so much for being here and being a part of the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to reiterate, as part of my welcome, if you have questions, please ask them, because when I was in school, this kind of thing didn't happen, and I would have given so much to be able to ask my questions, as weird or off be as they may seem. So please, guys, don't hesitate to ask whatever you want to know, and I'm here to help answer your questions. It was not long ago that I was in your seat, so I remember what it was like.
So yeah, definitely. As we'll say many times today, make sure you get those questions in. We've got some great questions over the past few weeks, and we want to continue that streak as we move forward today. So, I'm going to start things off as we normally do. Suzanne, can you talk a little bit about what your job is and what your day-to-day life looks like as the Community Relations Coordinator in the CR department for the Tennessee Titans?
Absolutely. So obviously everything looks a little bit different this year. In a traditional year, I think if, I had to sum up what our job function is, in kind of one or two sentences, it would be to leverage the resources of the team to create and drive change for our community. So that obviously looks a little bit different based on the time of the year, the needs of the community, the market you're in. Here in Tennessee, it's been a tough year. We had a tornado this time last year in early March. So we've done a lot of disaster relief since then for the different communities affected by the tornado. Obviously, COVID hit us really hard. So we've been trying to work with some local businesses, schools, teachers, parents, get some resources out there in the community to help people with digital learning and social emotional learning and all that good stuff. And then on Christmas, I don't know how many of you have heard, we had a bombing downtown. So it's been a really busy year in community relations. I would sum up 2020 as a lot of disaster relief. But in a normal year, we run programs from public education, hospital visits, school visits, fundraising events. We do a lot with youth and high school football, a lot with health and wellness. And then we have some offshoot programs that would assist veterans, people who, work with the American Cancer Society and some of those other United Way, Big Brothers Big Sisters, some of those big other like national nonprofits you've probably all heard of.
So it's a great part. We, really like doing programs like this because, in our department here in youth at the Hall of Fame in our youth and education department, we do a lot of work in the community as well. So, all those things you talk about really hit home with us. And, Jerry, Nathan, and I, our department here, we really come in to work every day knowing we can make a difference. And, you talk about all those different community initiatives that you listed there. And there's, I'm sure there's so many more that you didn't even touch on. But there's a special part, at least for me, that feels good to give back to the community. And it really makes the job worth it to see all these great programs and great moments, throughout your career. So, you hear the old adage, you never work a day in your life if you love what you do. And I think that really hits home for somebody in the community role. So why, specifically to you, why do you love what you do? And what keeps driving you to keep making a difference and keep changing lives, through your career?
I think when I started in sports, I wasn't exactly sure when I first started what I wanted to do. When you're in college, you're just kind of working in your athletic department, doing a little bit of everything. So I hadn't really found that sweet spot yet. But one of the things that I discovered really quickly was the type of platform that athletes have, not just professional athletes, but athletes at every level have such a platform, especially seeing the way that the public listens to and responds to our players was kind of a eye-opening experience for me to see that people are really paying attention to what they're doing and what they're saying. And so if you are working for the team and you're working with the players to leverage that platform, you have a really unique ability to create and emphasize and drive that change that you might not have working for a traditional nonprofit. So I would say, what keeps me going is definitely seeing that change happen and seeing how the players are a part of it. And every year there's new rookies. So every year there's new players finding their footing, figuring out how to use their platform. And so it's never, never gets old, never gets monotonous.
It's true. It's truly something new every day. You might do some repeat things here and there, but coming in and having so many of those different programs and initiatives throughout the entire calendar year, really helps with that not feel like it's the same 9 to 5 every day. And when you're out in the community, there's a little added benefit to coming into work every day. I got a note here. We got our first question on Facebook already.
Yes.
We got people already submitting questions. So I'm going to throw it to the Gold Jacket Lounge here with Nathan Martin, the coordinator, or the Youth and Education Coordinator here at the Hall of Fame.
Yes, Jake, thank you so much for sending it out here. And we do have our first Facebook question. But before I ask that, I am going also to reiterate what's been said by Susanna and Jake. Send in the questions, put it where you're at, where you go to school, put it on Facebook. We want to hear from you guys throughout this program. But our first question for you, Susanna, from Madison. She attends the University of Kentucky. And first she said, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this program. But then she says, it's kind of a general question that I think everybody that's been in this program has been asked. But she says, what are just some general tips that you would give a college student on how to break into the sports industry? It's something that a lot of people want to do. And then she said, even more specifically, how do you break into the NFL?
Great question, Madison. SEC girl out there, got you. When I first started, it was as a volunteer. I started with the football team, as Jake mentioned. They needed people to work game day and help host some of the prospective student athletes that they'd bring in for game day, do campus tours, that kind of thing. So they just needed a lot of people. They were hosting a lot of recruits. They had large families with them. So they just needed numbers. It was a numbers game. And so I volunteered for that. It was an unpaid position. And that's what got my foot in the door. So I think a lot of people are looking really specifically at different internships, maybe part-time work. So I would say take a really broad approach when you're looking for ways to get your foot in the door, because you just need that one foot wedged in the door, just a little bit. And from that job, working on game days with the football team, the student manager for the women's basketball team, she was the graduate assistant, and she oversaw all of the other student assistants and part-time assistants and interns that worked for the basketball program. She needed another person, and she asked this recruitment coordinator that I had reported to if she had anyone that she could steal or that would be good in that position. It was never posted anywhere. I never would have known about it. And so when that happened, my direct supervisor asked me, I was approached, they need someone to do a little more full-time work than this. Are you open to working a few days a week with the basketball program and kind of moving over there and getting more experience and working a lot more than you are here? And I said, yes. So that's how I ended up. That was kind of the foot wedged in the door to something that was a little more permanent. So my advice would be, one, consider all experiences really broadly. Look everywhere. In non-traditional places, when we're looking at people's resumes, we don't necessarily care about your specific department in sports when we're hiring. We just care that you've worked in sports. So don't get too fixated on one particular avenue. And then my other advice would be, if you have not considered grad school, that was a great road for me. And not everyone needs to go to grad school to get a job in sports. You do not need to do that. I work with plenty of people who do not have graduate degrees, but that's part of what allowed me to get more experience and make more connections. And that's how I got my job with the Redskins, or the Washington football team. Sorry, it's still a little new to me. I did an internship when I was in grad school, and one of the professors was an adjunct professor and worked full-time for the Redskins. So I made that contact that way, got an internship, and that's what led to my full-time job. So I personally credit grad school with helping me get into the NFL. That's not the case for everyone, but that's my case.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, you're just leaning on your own experience. When you give that advice, you mentioned grad school helped you, but you have colleagues that they didn't do the grad school route. Right. So, for each person, it might be a little bit different, but I think you did a good job answering Madison's question. And I'm going to send it back to Jake, but Jake, just know we've got tons of questions coming in. So feel free to send it back here whenever you want. We'll get these students' questions involved.
That sounds great. Thanks, Nathan. And I'm glad you mentioned, talking about those relationships and networking and building those relationships, because it did help you get the current role that you ended up in now. So I want to talk a little bit about that. When I was in school, when Nathan was in school, Kara, who you'll see here in a little bit, networking and building relationships is such a hot topic that's talked about so much. And you mentioned a little bit, but can you just dive into a little bit more on that and just how important it is and different ways students can go about, trying to get out of their comfort zone a little bit to start to build their network?
Absolutely. So part 2 of the relationships are important story. That internship that I told you about that I did at the Washington football team, It was my supervisor, her name's Angela. Angela left the Washington football team to take a promotion at the league office in New York City. So that position was open. It was a few weeks before training camp started, so they needed someone in there fast. And her boss's boss, I guess, the head of the department, called me as soon as she left and said, "We need someone here quick. We would need you to start in a week. Do you want to come, interview?" I'm using these quotes because I was the only person that interviewed for that job. He didn't have anyone else fly in. He didn't interview anyone else. He didn't offer anyone else. The job was not posted anywhere. So they needed a quick turnaround. And so when you're in a situation like that, which is often how it is in sports, people move away, things happen really quickly, very transient line of, business. So I had been the most recent intern, or one of the most recent, and done a really good job. So I got the phone call. And if I hadn't known him and had a good relationship with him, he probably would have called someone else. So when you're moving through your internships and your part-time work and all of your volunteer opportunities, try to think about those as job interviews. And we kept in touch after my internship ended. There was, I think, about 3 months between when my internship ended and when I got that call. So we had kept in touch every now and again so I could stay, kind of fresh in his mind. He wouldn't forget about me. And I know most people in my line of work have stories like that, where someone gave them a chance, and it was someone that trusted them and knew them and they had a relationship with. So relationships are huge. I've tried to keep in touch with everyone from every place that I've been. And the sports world is actually a little small. So it's funny I got to work on a project with my former supervisor at Octagon, the sports agency you mentioned. One of their clients plays for the Titans now. So we got to work on a project together. So it's funny how things overlap in the long run. And you're right, relationships are important. If you don't know how to make them, just blindly email people and ask to talk with them about their job. I did that a bunch. People do that a lot to me, and I'm always happy to talk to them. That's a good way to start if you just don't know where to.
Yeah, but I think Nathan and I can both echo that, it's important to build relationships. And we were both interns in the youth and education department at one point, and now both work full time in the department. So definitely can feel where you're coming from there. But I want to take a step back, before college. So say you're a student in high school, and I know we've got some high school kids, maybe some kids in college that don't know exactly what they want to do yet. So if you're in that position, and everybody goes through it at some point, that they kind of have an idea what they want to do, but they really aren't sure. They like this one thing, but they may like this thing. If you're in that position, how do you find that niche market, that one thing that's going to suit you best? So when you do go to work, you love what you do and you don't feel like, you're working a day in your life.
I went into undergrad undecided for my major. I mean, I had no idea. And I think the point of college is to try a bunch of different stuff. And, it didn't really sink in until I worked for the women's basketball team. That's when I really dove headfirst into sports and decided that was what was going to stick for me. I thought about medicine for a little bit. I just really didn't know until I tried. So that's part of the reason I went to grad school, is because I knew I wanted to work in sports, but I really didn't know what I wanted to focus on yet. And I always had heard that was a good way to expand, quote unquote, your horizons and get more experience and kind of narrow it down. And, I would have to agree with that. It was personally great for me, but I would say try a bunch of stuff, try different internships, take different courses. One of the courses that got me interested in sports was sports law. I thought it was fascinating. Decided I didn't want to go to law school and be in sports law, but it was really interesting. So that's what kind of sparked my interest and led me a little bit further down that road. So take as many courses as you can, volunteer as much as you can, take as many internships as you can. If there's leadership organizations or different organizations on campus, take advantage of those opportunities too. But college is for trying things.
And I think that's an important point, because you talk so much about, trying as much as your schedule allows. It's important because you're going to find out what you want to do, but you're also going to find out what you really don't want to do. And I think that's a huge piece of that too, because it is such an important time, and you're making a very, very important decision. And that's the decision that you got to make. So trying as much as you can really, really, truly, will help with that. And before we throw it back out to some, I do want to ask one question, because you did mention they're working for the University of Tennessee women's basketball team. And if sports, Pat Summitt, one of the greatest coaches of all time, spanning every sport. So, what was it like being around her, being around a program and her leadership when you were there at UT?
That's a great question. People ask me that all the time. My last season working for the team as an undergrad was actually the year that she retired. So I had 2 seasons with her, and then the year I graduated was when she retired. So it was an amazing experience, but it was also a sad time. I mean, that was truly kind of the end of an era of a legendary coach whose success, is just unbelievable. And I think the number one thing that I learned from her and her staff was that you just need, everything you're doing just has to be done to the best of your ability, or just don't do it. And that's something that she really believed in and implemented every day in practice and in games. And she just had this unwavering commitment to make every player that played for her be the best version of themselves. And that was not only as an athlete, but as a student and just as a person. And I will never forget her commitment to people, not just to athletes, but to people. And I think that's something, as I grow in my career and I have people working for me and I'm, leading a department one day, that's something that I'll never forget, is to focus not just on someone's output in a work capacity, but on their capacity as a human being as well.
And I think that's one of the great things, because that message right there transcends sports. It doesn't matter where you're at or what moment in your life in that message right there can be applied to so many different things. And that's a wonderful thing about stuff we're talking about today. Stuff that the game of football can teach is that it isn't just about the X's and O's, that, it's truly about the life lessons that sport teaches. And it's cool to see that isn't only football. We here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we are unapologetically football. And I'm sure the Titans are as well, but you look at a basketball program and a legendary coach like that, and that all of those lessons, can be learned in so many different ways. I'm going to go throw it back to Nathan now. I got a message from him. He just said we have tons of questions. So we're going to throw it back to him and let him ask some of our Facebook audience's questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. So the first question we got from Facebook is from Richie, and Richie attends the University of the Pacific. And it's kind of a general question again, but he goes, where are NFL internships posted? Like, where do I look? Is it the team website? Is it, another source? And then he said, do I have to know someone like to get one of these internships? How do I stand out? Do I have to know someone, or can I kind of blindly send my resume and my cover letter and get that internship?
Great question. We post all of our internships, part-time, full-time. All of our jobs are on Teamwork Online. So if you do not have an account on Teamwork Online, get on there. That's where pretty much every job in sports is going to be posted. And it's not just teams either. It's arenas, it's different leagues, agencies post. So go get an account. There's always jobs posted there. That's actually how I found the job I have now. That job actually did come open. It was posted on Teamwork Online. I applied without knowing anyone there. So yes, it can happen. They pulled my resume from the pile. I think there were like 900 and something applications, but they pulled my resume because of my experience. So no, you do not have to know someone. Your experience is really important. To be honest, I didn't even submit a cover letter. It was my resume just full of sports experience and I didn't know anyone. So, blindly reach out and don't be afraid to do that. And then Teamwork Online, monitor that all the time, because that is where we post everything.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice for Richie and really all the students that are watching. And then I wanted to ask a question off of that, because Thomas from Appalachian State said, what factors into like the team you end up working for? He says, is it just all opportunity? Is it, geography? Is it just your personal choice? And I'm sure that can vary for each person in the industry, but for you, in particular, why are you working for the Titans and you're not working for the Green Bay Packers or the Cleveland Browns or in another league even?
Great question. Also, I started working, my first full-time job was with the Washington football team. That came from attending grad school in DC at Georgetown.
Mhm.
And so my connections were there. That's where I got a job. I got this job from Teamwork Online, but I'm from this area. So I was really kind of committed when you're talking about community relations, this community, because I grew up here, is so important to me. I'm very committed to making it, the best that it can be. So that's part of my motivation when that job came open in applying here. You do see some people working for their hometown. Most people have a really specific career aspiration or goal in mind, and that's kind of leading where they end up. For example, if you work in marketing or sponsorship and you have a specific specialty, you're probably going to be looking for a specific team that kind of matches up with your vision and your expertise. And sometimes, to be honest with you, you do have to apply and take a job that's available, because not every team is hiring at the same time. So sometimes just what job is open is going to dictate that. Something that resonated with me, that was advice that was given to me, was your first job is literally that. It's your first job. You don't need to feel like you're planting roots at this first job and like you can never leave. So people used to always say, take your first job as your first job and don't worry about feeling like the first job you take is somewhere you're going to be stuck for the rest of your life, because that's just not the case.
Yeah, I think that's such great insight. You mentioned first job. I think even the same with internships. Like a lot of times those are a short period of time, 3 months, maybe even just a couple of weeks with training camp. Even if it's a year, like you said, you're not planting roots necessarily. Jake's mentioned you might figure out you don't like this career, and that's a good thing for you to learn when you're an intern. So that's really good insight. But I'm gonna send it back to Jake. We'll keep getting Facebook questions, guys. Keep submitting those. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, thanks, Nathan. And I'm actually going to throw it to somebody else now. Here, we talked earlier at the beginning about the mission of the Pro Football Hall of Fame and how our job is to honor the heroes of the game, preserve its history, promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. So part of our job is to preserve the history. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw it out to Kara Kwasinski, who is a member of our great Hall of Fame team here in Canton, Ohio, who's in front of some of those artifacts that pertain a little bit to Susanna's career. So, Kara, you there?
Hey, Jake, I'm here. Perfect. So, welcome everybody to the Pro Football Today Gallery, where we have some of the biggest milestones, record-breaking performances, and NFL players. Today, we are standing in front of something that is pretty unique and something that we take a lot of pride in our collection here at the Hall, which is our NFL draft cards. Each year, teams select players with the names that are written on the cards that Commissioner Goodell is able to use when he reads the selection to us fans. On display, we have those cards from the NFL draft in 2020, when stars like Joe Burrow and Chase Young were drafted first and second overall. And the Tennessee Titans drafted Isaiah Wilson in the 29th overall pick. Now, being around these draft cards reminds me that Nashville actually hosted the draft in 2019. Can you talk a little bit about your experience? Can you talk about your experience working the draft and a little bit about what you did?
I will never forget the draft. It was an amazing, amazing experience. And I probably will never see an event like that again. Just the scale of it was insane. Our role in community impact was to engage youth and high school athletes in the draft process. And so we hosted a number of events. Luckily, this was pre-COVID. We hosted a number of events at the stadium. We actually had some youth high school football players come out and announce some of the draft picks. there were a lot, the league did a great job. There were a lot of special opportunities to incorporate local athletes who, you know, when you think about like what their goals are, most of them would say my goal is to get drafted and play in the league one day. So they got to experience what that's like firsthand. And I think it was really, really special for them.
Definitely, I agree. We actually have a little bit of a presence there for the NFL experience for the draft. So a couple of I was able to go down and experience the enormity of it. It was like you said, it was just something that you probably will never ever experience again because it was just so grand and so beautiful to see. So thank you for that.
All right. Thanks, Kara. We appreciate that. We know we love giving an insight to our museum just to showcase all the great things we have on display here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And you talk a little bit about the draft, Susanna, it being one of the events that you never forget. You know, working in a community role, a community relations role, you know, you get to do a lot of different events, be a part of a lot of cool different initiatives, you know, but also working for an NFL club, an NFL team, you get to do a lot of things that not a lot of people get to do. So throughout your sports career, we'll go all the way back to Tennessee, all the way up till now, is there a moment that stands out to you as kind of like the coolest moment that you ever got to be a part of, or one of your most favorite memories, you know, working in the sports industries you worked in so far?
I honestly don't know if I can cut it down to just one. The draft was absolutely on the top of the list. Just the sheer scale of it and having credentials, being in the host city and being able to just be near the stage and just experience, you know, it was just an in awe moment. And when you're there in person and you're seeing the reactions of the players like firsthand, it really is special. I would probably say working with Pat Summitt in her last season as a coach would rank up there too. There were just a few really specific moments. Her coming out with her Alzheimer's diagnosis, and that kind of time around the team and the way that the community rallied around her. I'll never forget that either. Almost every team we played that season at home came into the arena with t-shirts, the We Back Pat t-shirts that the school was selling to raise money for Alzheimer's. Just the way that the basketball community and community in general rallied around her was so special. And then when they won the SEC championship and cut the net down, that was pretty special too. Just all around, and just an unbelievable season. And then I would probably say, honestly, 2 seasons ago with the Titans, we get in Ryan Tannehill and we have all these pieces, and then just out of nowhere, we end up in the AFC Championship game. And it was really, really fun to be part of a kind of under the radar sneaker team that people kind of, you know, all season had kind of just diminished, I felt like, what we'd done. And, you know, the national media kind of largely left us out of the playoff story. And then, you know, we end up in the AFC Championship game and, you know, lost to the Super Bowl team. So I'm okay with that. But it was a really fun experience to be a part of. And then I guess last on the list would probably be just this weird COVID time. I mean, we played a game on a Tuesday night. I mean, it's just been a truly bizarre time to be in sports. We're playing games just at bizarre times and days, and the testing is really interesting to watch that process. And the way that, you know, we had an outbreak and we didn't practice for like 10 days and then came out and beat the Bills. That was a very exciting game as well.
You know, you mentioned one thing there about making that playoff run. You know, we've talked to some of your coworkers earlier in the year about the atmosphere, and I think it's really cool when you look at a job like community relations, where, you know, you're working for an NFL team, but you're not on the football side. Mm-hmm. But the atmosphere that the football side builds kind of bleeds over, you know, throughout the entire organization. You know, we talk about Mike Vrabel being the head coach down there, being such a great players coach. You know, we have a great tie to him being from, you know, Northeast Ohio, mm-hmm. him being a Buckeye, you know, special relationship there. But, you know, he's that guy. He's got a great relationship with the players, really brings a lot of energy to the team. So when you make a playoff run like that and you have a coach who has such a high energy level, how much of that does bleed over and or leak out into the entire organization, just not, the team and the football side of things?
We are really lucky that we have a head coach and a general manager who really wrap everyone around the team. And, I don't know, I can't tell you if that's common or not. I only currently work for one head coach, but they do an incredible job of making sure that every person who works for the organization feels like they're part of the team. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to work in a team environment, because I just love that feeling of all working together towards a common goal. And I think when you achieve your goal, making the playoffs, obviously we wanted to win a Super Bowl, but we made the playoffs, we made the AFC Championship. You just all have this level of excitement that's really just unparalleled. It definitely bleeds over, into the non-football departments. They were so nice to send every person that worked for the organization a game ball. So, I think a lot of it is dependent on the inclusivity of your head coach and general manager. And we're really lucky, and our owner too, that they consider everyone who works for the team, every single employee, as part of the team. And I'm talking like even people who work in our cafeteria, who clean the building. I mean, they really have that we're all in it together mentality.
Another great message on how sports can kind of intrude into everyday life. You always hear the team analogy, but you hear a firsthand story just like that, and you see it is true, and it's not just something you read in the textbook or something the professor tells you or a coach tells you. It is truly in every different organization that you can be a part of. I know Nathan's got some more great questions from our Facebook audience of students, so keep sending those in. See if we can get better and better, but I'm gonna throw it back to Nathan here for some next round of our Facebook questions.
Yeah, I got a couple I want to ask, and the first one's from Maria. She goes to Michigan State, so not SEC, but you got to give her at least a little bit of respect and love there. We're up here in Big Ten country. So she said, you mentioned, and we've talked really, Jake and I, the importance of relationships and how that can help you in the job hunt. But one, how big of a role really are those? How does LinkedIn play into that? She specifically asked. And then how can you use a tool like LinkedIn to kind of maintain and keep those relationships active without being like overbearing, I guess?
Sure. Great question. I get, when I told you earlier that I get a lot of questions from students wanting to know about my work and just kind of chat about it. A lot of those messages that I get are from LinkedIn. It can be really hard to find people's email addresses online. Not every team advertises their email structure permanently on their website. There's not like links to click on to just send emails, cold emails. So a lot of times people rely on LinkedIn to get in touch with people. And I actually also, I don't recommend this, but I do get Twitter and Facebook messages also. And I think I appreciate being contacted on LinkedIn because it is more of a professional working environment. It's not, your personal social media. When you get on LinkedIn, you expect that kind of thing. So when people send me messages, I give them my email address and I say, I'm happy to chat. Definitely reach out. And I think the nice thing about cold emails is if you can get people to respond and you have a genuine, nice conversation, they're always open to helping you down the road. And so definitely don't underestimate a cold email. I've talked to a few students over the years that just, were so great. And I've remembered their names, and we don't have any job openings right now. But when I talk to students that are great on the phone or over email, I'll remember that when we do have job openings. And if I ever see their names in a resume pile in a job application, I would remember it. So don't underestimate that. Relationships are so important, but they're not everything. What matters, I think, the most probably is your experience and showing that through your resume, you're committed to this industry. And just the more you can do, whether it's internships, volunteers. I went in college and volunteered at a couple different like SEC tournaments, just doing like media relations stuff for 3 days. So it's not like, I'm not saying an internship needs to last 6 months to be valuable, because that's not the case.
Yeah, that's really good advice on how to use LinkedIn or the cold email, the cold message. And I would encourage students, we've posted in the Facebook the link to your LinkedIn, to Susanna's LinkedIn. It's got an email address to contact us here at the Hall of Fame. If you've got questions, use that as a resource. We're not going to get to everybody's question. So, if we don't get to your question, send it on to her. She'd be more than happy to answer it. I do have another one, though, I want to ask you, and this is from Ethan. He attends Boston University, and I think this is a really good question. He says, what's that piece of advice that you know now that you didn't know in college, but you wish you had known it back then?
That is a good question. I would say, with hindsight being 2020, when I was in college and I realized that I wanted to work in sports, I felt like I needed to have it all figured out and have a job lined up for when I graduated. And I felt immense pressure to do that. And once I applied to grad school and was accepted, I think some of that, went away, because I was not going to take a full-time job in grad school. But I think I would tell myself, like, you don't have to have it all figured out in the same month that you're graduating college. That's probably what I would tell myself. And that's part of the reason I went to grad school, because I didn't have it all figured out, and that bought me time to figure it out. And I also think, looking back, I probably would say to myself, do better at keeping up with people that you've worked with in the industry, because even your peers, people who are student assistants, who are kind of on that same internship level as you, one day they're going to be directors, they're going to be vice presidents, they're going to be managers. So don't forget that just because you're even with someone right now doesn't mean that later in life they can't help you, because they're going to be in a much different position. So I think that's two things I would say.
Yeah, both those things are really, really good points to be made, and advice to give out. And because you mentioned it, I will ask this question. I was going to send it back to Jake, but it just fits too well. Evan from Kutztown University, the alma mater of Hall of Famer Andre Reed, Buffalo Bills legend. He said, and you have a master's degree, but is that required for your position, the master's? Is it required? Are you telling all the students watching, like, hey, go to grad school? Like, kind of where do you fall on that?
I feel like I come across that way because it was so great for me personally in developing my relationships and my experience and my career. But I work with so many people who have just undergraduate degrees. They never went to grad school. And there's definitely no rule out there that says you have to go to grad school to get a job in sports. I think for me, just based on my experience, it bought me more time to figure out what exactly I wanted to be doing, and to kind of get my foot in the door on a more full-time basis. So when I was picking my, just to give you a little background, when I was picking my grad school, I had gone to Tennessee for undergrad. So I lived in a true college town. There really weren't professional teams at all. There really weren't any, major headquarters for leagues or agencies or players unions or anything of that nature. It was really just a college town. And there were some semi-pro teams too. But when I was picking what my next move would be, I really wanted to move to a bigger city where I could just experience more, where I could experience professional sports, where I could, have, headquarters of sports agencies. The NFLPA has an office in Washington, D.C. It's really a hub for sports. And I felt like I needed to experience that. So that's part of the reason I picked Georgetown. They also have a program that allows you to take classes at night, so you can intern or work full-time during the day. All the professors are adjunct professors, so they work full-time in the field that they're teaching. That's when I mentioned there was someone from the Washington football team who taught a class. So if you're going to pick grad school, good for you. Make your choice carefully. Don't waste that time. Make sure that you're choosing something that is a fit for what you want and where you see yourself in the future. So don't just willy-nilly think I'm going to go to grad school and then that's going to like get me a job in sports. Be intentional about your choices.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think that provides more clarity, for sure. And you kind of outlined how you could take either route, and there's benefits to both. And I think just being intentional in your decisions is really what I took away from that. So that's really good stuff. So Jake, back to you, man.
All right, appreciate it, Nathan. Thank you. We've talked so much today about building relationships and getting that experience and getting your foot in the door. So, once you get your foot in that door, that's when, the learning really, really starts.
Absolutely.
So you've got the unique experience of working in a few different industries, not only collegiate sports, you've got, an agency, you've got a soccer team, and now in professional football. Is there experiences or things you learned from those different experiences that you use in your current job today?
I think, to be honest with you, that I use a little bit of every experience I've had. I think everything that, that's why internships are so important. Everything you do just really plays into your understanding of sports and the way the industry works. And I think the more diverse experiences you can have, it just helps you be a better critical thinker and think outside the box and bring different ideas to the table. There are people who have come work, they started in the NBA and now they work in the NFL, and that's great because there is a different way of doing things in different leagues, and the more experience you can bring to the table and say, oh, I saw this work somewhere else, at a team or at a league or wherever you worked, just lets you be, I think, more valuable the more you can bring to the table with your experience.
Yeah. And then so once you're in your current job, the learning doesn't stop. There's so many different things you have to do to continue better yourself, whether it's learning COVID protocols or working from home. So you in your position, what are things, or how have you used different technology or books or leadership classes to continue to better yourself within your current career?
During COVID, especially in the beginning, community impact or community relations, whatever you call it, is primarily events based. So there was a time when we were sitting there thinking, we're going to have to adapt what we're doing. And we eventually did. We moved our school visits, for example, were previously in classroom and in school visits. We moved them to Zoom. So if the kids were learning virtually and they were not in school, we just had the whole class join on Zoom, and their parents were able to help them. Whoever was watching them was able to help them. And if they were in a class, we did have some schools who stayed in school. So their teachers were able to join for the whole classroom, pull down the big projector screen. So we did figure out how to adapt. Zoom and virtual things like Teams has been fantastic for us personally. It's given us a way to connect with the community that I am so glad exists, because it's getting better. It just hasn't been safe to be out there putting our players in front of people. You just don't know what people feel comfortable with as well. So having the ability to connect over technology has been huge. And one caveat I will add for community relations is that you are responding to what's happening in the world and in your city in a way. So things like disaster relief, I was talking about the tornadoes, COVID, the bombing, with kids being virtual learning and not in school, there's a lot of gaps that you need to fill with technology and access to Wi-Fi and food, because a lot of kids, they counted on going to school to get their breakfast and their lunch. So now you have this void to fill that wasn't there before. So when you're in community relations, part of what you're doing to learn is just paying attention. You're listening to the mayor's press conferences, you're listening to podcasts about things that are going on in your city and about social justice. And it's just a continuous absorbing of what you hear people saying that they need, nationally and especially locally too.
And I think that's really a really cool viewpoint on that, because when things like that do happen, a lot of people look to government aid, but a ton of people look to those sports organizations, to the athletes of their hometown, and saying, how are we going to help? And then, from your side of things, you do get to see, like, all right, let's come to work, here's how we're going to help our community. And I think that's truly a wonderful thing to, to be a part of, because, people say that their job makes a difference, but, you have the actual physical, you can see it on TV, see it in person, of the difference being made. And I think that's a very cool, responsibility to have, where there's probably a little bit of pressure, but I think that it's a very cool responsibility to kind of, at the end of the day, say that, you got to help people when, that's the goal of a lot of people's, day-to-day life.
It's a lot of listening
to
what people need and what's important to them.
For sure. We got a few more minutes left here, and I want to make sure we get to our last Facebook question. Nathan's got one more he wants to ask, so I'm going to send it back to our Gold Jacket Lounge for the last time, to Nathan Martin of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. And like you said, this will be the last one from Facebook. And I know we didn't get to everybody's questions, but, the information is there. Please connect with Susanna on LinkedIn. Send your questions to her that way. Or if there are questions for us at the Hall, connect with us on LinkedIn, or you send us an email. Like, we want to answer these questions. We can't sit here all day. We got other things to go do. We're working in the industry. But I did want to ask this question. This is from Zach. He goes to Temple University. And he said, what skills, when you're looking to hire somebody for an internship, an entry-level job, what skills are you looking at for potential candidates? You've talked a lot about the experience, but what specific skills, maybe outside of experience, are you looking for?
I love answering this question because there is a misconception, I think, that we want to hire fans of the team. I do not want to hire fans of the team. I need you to be committed to your work. And when you're spending so much time, especially in our department, you're spending a lot of time with players and coaches, and you really want to start off that relationship as equals, not as asking for an autograph or, something of that nature. Like, we get a lot of questions or a lot of people applying for jobs and saying, I'm a huge fan of the team. And I'm thinking, I hope you're actually a huge fan of what we're doing, off the field and the way that we're running our business. We hope you're not seeking this job opportunity just to be close to the team. So I would say, I would like for people to demonstrate that they are applying for these jobs because they have a passion for sports, for working in sports, for advancing sports, not necessarily for the players or for the team, as it relates to what we're doing on the field. I think a lot of people want to work in sports because it seems really cool, and it is really cool. But you guys know, we work long hours. We work through pretty much all the major holidays. The NFL season falls over Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas, New Year's. So you're missing some time with your family. You're missing some downtime that a lot of people get at the end of the year. And it's exciting. And I love my job. But one of the things we want to know from people is that you're not just wanting to work in sports because it's cool. You're really committed to this, and you are on board for weird hours, long hours, weekends, you name it. So I would say, aside from experience, that's probably one of the other number one things, is just a commitment to being in this industry and to kind of the right things, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's a great piece of advice to give for prospective students and things like that are looking into the sport industry, because a lot of times you think that's the career you want because you are a fan.
People glamorize it for sure.
And I think it's okay to kind of want to work in sports because you grew up a fan of sports.
Absolutely.
But like you're saying, you got to get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm not just a fan of football or a fan of the Tennessee Titans. I'm a fan of what we're doing in the community. in
Absolutely.
a way that we can give back, or whatever the job may be, you know, productions or social media. Like, I'm a fan of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
That's just great advice for the students. And guys, I've appreciated all your questions. Like I said, connect so that you can get those other questions answered. It's been a lot of fun, but I know Jake always likes to end with one last question. So Jake, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. And yes, we kind of dove into that question just a little bit right there. And, we like to end this program because there has been so much great advice that has been given, through the answers to everything that you've answered so far, whether it's been, about what you do, relationship building, networking, whatever it might be. But if we can sum up everything we said today, and you can leave everybody watching, all the students, young professionals, high school kids watching, one piece of advice, what is that one thing you want them to take away today?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say use the time you have now before you need a full-time job to survive. Use the time you have now to explore what you want to do. College, high school, grad school, those are for exploring what you want to do, and really take advantage of the time that you have to do that, because it is very limited and you don't really realize how valuable that time is until it's over.
Absolutely. And I can't agree more with that. So with that, we're going to wrap things up today for our latest installment of the Before the Snap series, today featuring our special guest, Susanna Nichols, the Tennessee Titans Community Relations Coordinator. Again, thank you so much for being part of the program today and taking time out of your day. We greatly appreciate you sharing all your insights with students, truly, as Nathan read off all those schools all across the country. So thank you for doing that today. We are greatly appreciative of your time.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was fun.
And then before we leave today, just a reminder, everybody watching, make sure you tune in to all of our social media channels for all the great content we're putting out here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn even. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all of those different things to hear about what's going on here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Want to also plug, all the Titans social media channels as well. Make sure you give them a follow and see all the great things they're doing there in Nashville and the surrounding communities. And lastly, if you're a podcast listener, make sure you subscribe to the Pro Football Hall of Fame's podcast, The Mission, hosted by my great friend and coworker here, Mr. Jameer Howerton, as he is interviewing a lot of different people, whether it be finalists for the class of 2021, different NFL legends, media members, members of the Black College Football Hall of Fame as we celebrate Black History Month. Make sure you give us subscribe to that as well, and tune in and listen to all that great content. Next week, February 26th, we are lucky to have special guest Kendall Peters of the Minnesota Vikings, who works in sales and engagement analysis. So we are really looking forward to having him on as part of our next Before the Snap series. But again, I want to thank our special guest this week, Ms. Susanna Nichols of the Tennessee Titans, for connecting with us and being a part of the Before the Snap series. So for everybody who tuned in today, thank you so much, and we hope to see you right back here next week on the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Facebook page for our Before the Snap series. Thank you, everybody.